Happy New Year to you. Do you plan on making any resolutions anytime soon? It seems to be a New Year tradition that each year we make a resolution to change something in our life. And I guess that's what it's about. We are motivated to perhaps do life differently. In other words, we want to change or transform our life in some way. And it's great that we do this because it really means that we've done some reflection. We've thought about what's working and what's not, and we've made some resolve to do things differently. Now, we also know that most New Year's resolutions, or resolutions any time of the year for that matter, usually have a short life. They don't last much more than about 30 days according to the research. And most of them, 90% of them, are gone within a few months. So they're not a great way to really make changes. And part of the reason is that there's really three ways to go about it, and most of us tend to choose the first or the second way. The first way, of course, is to just do it by sheer willpower. All right, I'm going to change this. I'm going to do this differently, and I'm going to do this every day this year. That is possible to do, but it requires an incredible amount of willpower and resolve. The other possibility is that you take something away. Well, I'm not going to eat any more junk food. So you're going to take junk food out of your life. Well, that's another way to do it, but again, it requires willpower and a lot of resolve, and usually it doesn't work out. The third way, which is the one that I prefer, is to try to set up the conditions which will give rise to a particular result that I want in my life. So there's several aspects to this. First of all, it's set up conditions, and that will give a certain result. This is known as the theory of dependent origination, and it can be traced way back to the early yogic days, and certainly through the teachings of the Buddha in later years. And it's still very prevalent today in those parts of our world and life where we want to bring about meaningful change. We set up the conditions that are going to help make that change happen. Now, first of all, of course, we have to be aware of what our intention is. What are we really trying to shift or transform in our life? For example, and I'll give you an example that I used some years ago and really worked well. I want to have more loving relationships with my family. So that was my intention. My question then was, well, what are the conditions that would help me create that? And so when I had a look back at the times where I did have great relationships with my family, I looked there for a clue. I found out that there were times where I was affable. I wasn't being angry or judgmental. It was times where I felt very centered in myself, and I felt very peaceful within my own being, so I didn't need to really lash out or criticize or blame anybody else, and several other things. I won't go through the entire list. So what I did then was to set about creating those conditions. So each day, on a daily basis, I would remind myself of my intention to create better relationships with my family. And then I would then give myself one task to do that in that day, one thing that would help set up those conditions. Now, one of the things I came up with was doing acts of loving service. When I did acts of service to members of my family without any expectation of reward or return, they often responded very favorably. And so that was one of my intentions that I worked on various different days, was to just sometime during the day do some kind act. It might be just brushing the snow off someone's car, or doing some extra dishes, or whatever it might be. And that was just the one small thing. And then taken over a period of about 6 months or so, by doing just the one small thing each day, whichever it was, that might have been a different condition I was trying to set up, like to speak mindfully to people. So I would that day make sure that at least on 2 or 3 occasions I was very aware and mindful of how I spoke to members of my family, without judgment and without blame. And then I also set myself up to notice when I fell off the rails, notice when I didn't do what I wanted to do, or notice when I did things that gave rise to a different outcome than the one I was looking for. And over a period of time, this was successful. So if you're making a resolution at New Year's, or for that matter, any time of the year, you want to change something in your life, you want to set up the conditions for something to shift. And think about what those conditions are. First of all, get really clear on your intention. What do I really want to create? And that's really a result. It's not a thing that you're going to do. Creating change is not about crossing things off a checklist on a daily basis. It's more about an ongoing, slow, and very focused way of being, not doing. It's all about being, not doing, okay? And so I wish you well with that. And if you do celebrate New Year's, or if you're celebrating anything else, I hope it's a great time ahead for you. Be well. Thank you.